The deed was in my left boot. I know that sounds like a strange place to start, but that's where it always was. Folded twice. Oilcloth wrapped. Tucked against my arch where I could feel it with every step across that yard. 312 acres of Montana high grass. Creek water running clear off the Absarokas. A barn that needed a new ridgepole but stood solid otherwise. My father's land. His father's before that. I'd worked it alone for going on 11 years by then, and I kept that deed in my boot, like some men keep a photograph of their wife. It was the only thing I had left that told me who I was. That was the fall of 1883. I was 44 years old and I didn't know it, but everything was about to change on account of a woman I'd never met and a wrong I almost rode past. Dalton Camp sat about 6 miles northeast of my place, down off the bench and into the cottonwood bottomland, where Hanson Creek bent west. They called it a camp, but it was more a collection of men who'd come for the railroad survey work and stayed on after the survey crew moved through. A cook shack, 3 bunkhouses, a sutler's store that sold bad whiskey and worse credit. Maybe 40 men at peak season, down to 15 or so by October when I was riding through. I didn't go there for company. I went for salt and nails and whatever the sutler had in the way of dried beans. I heard it before I saw it. A woman's voice, not screaming, nothing so clean as that, more a hard, compressed kind of sound, like somebody trying to breathe with a hand on their chest. I came around the corner of the sutler's porch, and there were 3 men from the survey camp, and there was her, and one of them had her by the wrist, and she was pulled half off the ground, twisted sideways, her other hand gripping the post, like she was trying to hold the world still. She wasn't young in the way men mean when they say young. She was maybe 35, dark-haired, dressed plain, a widow's gray wool dress that had been good once, now worn through at both elbows. Her jaw was set so hard I could see the muscle jump in it. She wasn't crying. That's the thing I noticed first. Not a single tear. Just that jaw and those eyes that were looking at the man holding her wrist, like she was calculating something. I should tell you I was not a man who went looking for fights. I'd had enough of those in my 30s, working cattle drives down out of the Bitterroot, and I'd learned the hard way that being right doesn't keep you from getting hurt. I was a quiet man, an alone man. I paid my debts and worked my land, and I did not, as a rule, put myself in other men's business. But there's a thing that happens in your chest when you see something like that. Something below thought, below calculation. And before I'd made any decision, my horse was stopped, and I was on the ground. Let her go. The man holding her looked at me. He was younger than me by 15 years, broad through the shoulder, with the particular smile of a man who's used to not being argued with. Mind your ground, old-timer. Old-timer. I was 44. Let her go, I said again. Same voice, not louder. What happened next was not heroic. There were 3 of them. I took a fist in the side of the head that turned the world gray for a moment, and I got the man holding her by the collar and brought his face down onto my knee, and the other 2 grabbed me, and the 4 of us ended up in the mud beside the water trough, which is where the camp's foreman found us. He sorted it out, sent his men off with a tongue lashing and a look that promised worse later. He was not a bad man, that foreman. A Swede, named Keller, who believed in order the way other men believe in God. He told me the woman had come in 2 days prior, asking for work as a cook. They'd taken her on, and then 3 of his men had decided that entitled them to more than cooking. She was standing 10 feet away while he told me this, her wrist red where it had been grabbed, her dress muddy at the hem. She was listening to everything Keller said with that same jaw and those same calculating eyes. Is she owed wages? I asked. Keller looked uncomfortable. 2 days. Pay her. He did. $2 silver. She took them without looking at him. I walked to my horse. I heard her footsteps behind me in the mud. I turned around. I'm Nora Crane, she said. Just that. Like she was presenting a document. Cole Briggs. Where are you headed? I told her north, toward my place. She looked at me for a moment. Not helpless, nothing like that. Just a kind of clear-eyed assessment. The way you'd look at a river crossing you weren't sure about. I can cook, she said. And I work hard. I'm not asking for charity. I'll earn my keep. I stood there in the mud with the side of my head starting to swell, and I thought about the 11 years of eating my own cooking. I thought about the empty chair at my table, and how I'd gotten used to not seeing it. You ride? I asked. I can learn. She rode behind me on the gray, her hands light on my coat, not clutching, just steady, and she didn't say a word the whole 6 miles back to my place. The sky had gone that particular October color, deep blue going to iron at the edges, and the grass was already brown and flattened from an early frost. I watched her take it in as we came up over the bench and the ranch came into view, the house, the barn, the creek line dark with cottonwoods. It's good land, she said. Not pretty, not beautiful, good. Like she was a woman who knew the difference between what looked nice and what would hold. I gave her the room that had been my mother's. Small, east-facing, a window that caught the morning light. She had nothing but what she was wearing and a canvas bag that turned out to hold a Bible, a change of clothes, a folding knife, and a packet of letters bound with twine that she never opened in front of me. I didn't ask about the letters. I didn't ask about anything. A person gets to keep what they carry. The first morning she was up before me, which had never happened with another human being in my house in 11 years. I came into the kitchen, and there was a fire in the stove and coffee on, and the smell of something with bacon in it, and I stood in the doorway for a moment longer than I needed to, just to get used to the fact of it. She turned from the stove. Sit down. I sat down. She put a plate in front of me, fried potatoes with the bacon, and 2 eggs from my own hens, and she poured the coffee, and she sat across from me with her own plate, and she ate without ceremony. She didn't ask how I liked it. She didn't watch me for approval. She just ate, and it was the best meal I'd had in 11 years, and I told her so. She looked up. Something moved across her face that wasn't quite a smile, but was in the neighborhood of one. It's just potatoes, she said. I know, I said. She stayed. That's the plain truth of it. She stayed, and she worked. And there was nothing arranged or formal about it. It just became the shape of the days. She cooked, and she kept the house. And she learned to ride well enough inside of 2 weeks that I trusted her with the gray on her own. She had a way with my dogs that took me by surprise. 3 working heelers that had been mine so long they'd gotten strange and particular about strangers. And within a week they were sleeping at her feet. She was not easy. I want to be clear about that. She had edges, a directness that could land sharp when she thought something was being done wrong, and a quiet that was nothing like peace, more like a door held shut by a woman who'd learned the cost of opening it. She argued with me twice in the first month about the right way to lay up hay for the winter. She'd grown up on a farm in Kansas, and she wasn't wrong. And the second time, I stopped arguing and did it her way, and the hay lasted through March without spoiling, which it hadn't done the 3 years previous. I never asked about her life before. She never offered it all at once. It came in pieces over weeks, the way things do when trust is built on work and quiet rather than questions. She'd been married. Her husband had died of a fever 2 winters back in Wyoming. No children. She'd sold what they had to cover the debts, and had been working her way north. Not entirely sure toward what. Just north, away from it. The men at Dalton Camp had been the 3rd situation of that kind she'd run into since leaving Wyoming. She told me that last part flat, without anger, without performance. Just a fact. I sat with that for a while. It won't happen again, I said. She looked at me across the table. I know, she said. I didn't know, when I said it, exactly what I meant by it. It turned out I was promising something larger than I knew. Word gets around in rangeland country. There's no faster communication system on earth than 3 ranchers at a sutler's counter, and by November, half the county knew that Cole Briggs had a woman up on the bench. Some of it was curiosity. Some of it was the particular type of attention that a lone woman draws from men who think aloneness in a woman means something it doesn't. The first man came on a Tuesday, a drifter type who said he was looking for winter work. He was polite enough to me, but when Nora came out of the house to bring me the tool I'd sent her for, he looked at her the way a man looks at something he's pricing, and she went very still in the way I'd come to recognize. That calculation behind the eyes, the jaw setting, and something in me went cold and direct as a creek in January. I told him there was no work and to move on. He moved on. The second man was less polite. A surveyor type out of Miles City, came on a Friday afternoon with whiskey on his breath and a story about needing directions that nobody needed directions to. He got off his horse in my yard, and he was looking at the house, not at me. She your wife? He asked. I was aware of her in the kitchen doorway behind me. I didn't turn to look. I kept my eyes on him. What she is to me is none of your concern, I said. What concerns you is that you're on my land without invitation, and I've asked you once to leave. Only once? That's all you get. He looked at me for a long moment. That measurement men do, calculating whether the other man is serious. And something he saw in my face must have settled the question, because he got back on his horse and rode out without another word. I heard the kitchen door close behind me. When I came inside, she was at the stove, her back to me. I poured myself coffee. You didn't have to do that, she said. I know, I said. She turned then. And the look on her face was the first time I saw it clearly. Not gratitude exactly, nothing as simple as that. More like the look of a person who'd stopped being surprised that the ground would hold, like she'd stepped on uncertain ground for so long that solid earth had become something she had to relearn how to trust. It did something to me I didn't have words for. Still don't, entirely. The real trouble came in December. His name was Royce Adder. I'll use the name he went by, not the one his mother gave him. He ran a crew of 4 men and called himself a land agent, which in those days, in that county, meant he identified property being worked by people who didn't yet have clean title, and then made sure they didn't get it. He'd done it to 2 homesteaders on the East Bench the previous year. Legal, in the narrowest possible sense, but the kind of legal that only works if the other man doesn't know his rights or doesn't have the money to assert them. He came on a Wednesday morning with 2 of his men. I was at the barn. He came to the house first. I got there to find him on my porch, hat in hand, smiling at Nora through the doorway. He was a handsome man, Adder. That was part of how he worked, that smile and that easy manner. And he was telling her that there was a question about the eastern boundary of my property that he'd been asked to look into by the county office. Nora was standing in the doorway with her arms folded, and the expression of a woman who had already assessed the situation and didn't like what she'd found. I came up behind his men. Adder, I said. He turned. That smile. Briggs. Didn't see you there. I was just telling your... He paused, letting the gap sit there with intent. Your woman, that there's a survey question on your eastern line. There's no question on my eastern line. My eastern line was surveyed in 1871 and recorded at the Custer County seat. You want to see the paperwork? I'll send you to Miles City. The smile didn't waver. Now, the county has received a conflicting survey from... The county received no such thing, Nora said. Adder looked at her. Something flickered in that smile. Beg pardon? I was in Miles City 2 weeks ago for supplies, she said. I went to the county recorder's office. I looked at the survey records for this property and the 4 surrounding it. There is no conflicting survey on file. There is no open question on this boundary. What there is, she unfolded her arms and took 1 step forward into the doorway, is a man standing on someone else's porch, lying about county records. The silence that followed that was the particular kind of silence that falls when a room, or in this case a porch, has shifted, and everyone is recalibrating. I want to tell you I'd asked her to go to Miles City for that reason. I hadn't. She'd done it on her own, 2 weeks prior, without telling me, because she'd heard Adder's name from a neighbor woman at the dry goods store and had understood, faster than I had, what was likely coming. Adder looked from her to me. The smile was gone. You'd be well advised, I said, to get off my property. He left. His men left with him. I stood on my porch for a while after, looking out at the bench grass blowing in the December wind. I heard her come up beside me. You went to Miles City, I said. 2 weeks ago. You didn't tell me. I wasn't sure I'd find anything worth telling. A pause. I did. I looked at her. She was watching the road where Adder had gone, her arms folded against the cold, her breath clouding in the air. Thank you, I said. She glanced at me. It's your land, she said. It ought to stay that way. Adder came back once more. January. He dropped the pretense of the survey and sent one of his men with a cash offer for the property, a low one, insultingly low, and a suggestion that I might find it in my interest to sell before the winter got long and a man alone on the bench had accidents. Nora was standing 3 feet away when the man delivered this message. I looked at the offer. I set it on the table. I looked at the man. "Tell him no," I said. "Tell him the next man he sends onto this property without invitation, I'll have arrested for trespass, and I'll file an affidavit with the Territorial Marshal's office about the survey fraud he ran on the Henderson homestead last March. Tell him I have names and dates. Tell him I've already written the letter and it's sitting ready to post." The man looked nervous. Do you want to find out?" He left. I looked at Nora. "Do you actually have the letter ready?" she asked. "I'll have it written by tonight." She looked at me for a moment, and then she laughed. The first time I'd heard her really laugh. Not a polite sound, but the real thing, sudden and a little surprised, like it had gotten out before she could stop it. It changed her whole face. I wrote the letter that evening. Nora sat across the table with my mother's old lamp between us, and read it through when I was done, and made 3 corrections for clarity, and I posted it in the morning. Adder never came back. February is the long month on the bench. The cold settles in serious, and the days are short, and the work is reduced to keeping the animals alive, and keeping the pipes from freezing, and keeping yourself from going strange with the quiet. I'd done 11 of them alone. This one was different. We played cards in the evenings. She beat me at cribbage, with a consistency that bordered on offensive. She read from her Bible sometimes, not preaching, just reading to herself, lips barely moving, and I'd sit with a mending or a catalog, and we'd be quiet together, which is a different thing entirely from being quiet alone. There's a warmth to it, a ballast, like the house is weighted properly instead of listing to one side. She told me about Kansas in February, about her father's farm and the grasshoppers that came one summer in her childhood and stripped every field, and the following winter her mother had boiled shoe leather for soup, and her father had laughed about it at the table, genuinely laughed, because what else do you do? She told it the way she told most things, plain, no performance, and I understood she was trusting me with it, that she didn't tell this to everyone. I told her about my father, about working this land beside him from the time I could walk, about burying him in the East pasture in 1872, and sitting at this same table alone that first night, not crying, just sitting, trying to figure out what a man is when the thing that made him is gone. She listened. She didn't fill the space with consolation, she just let it be what it was. "He knew you'd hold it," she said, when I'd been quiet a while. "How do you figure?" "He left it to you." She looked at me straight. "He knew." I had to look away for a moment, out the window at the dark. I'd been holding this land for 11 years, and I'd been telling myself it was for my father's memory, for the deed in my boot, for the principle of a thing. But sitting there in the lamplight in February with this woman across the table, I understood something I hadn't let myself understand before, that I'd been holding it because somewhere underneath all the alone years, I'd believed that if I held long enough, if I kept it good, something worth having would find its way here. March thaw. The creek ran fast with snowmelt, and the first grass came up in the low places along the south-facing slopes, and my dogs lost their minds over something in the brush every morning. Life coming back, the days longer. She'd been with me 5 months by then. She was splitting kindling one afternoon. She'd just taken over the kindling, decided one day I was doing it wrong, which I probably was, and I was repairing the corral fence nearby, and there was just the sound of her axe, and my hammer, and the creek, and the wind, and I was aware, with the particular awareness of a man who has spent too long alone, of how right it sounded. All of it together, how it fit. I set down my hammer. "Nora." She set down the axe and looked at me, waiting. "I'd like you to stay," I said, "permanent. If you're willing. I don't have words for this that aren't awkward, but I mean to say, I'd like you to stay as my wife, if you'd have that, and if you won't, I'll understand it. But I want you to know, it's what I'm asking." The creek ran. A horse shifted in the corral. She looked at me for a long moment with those clear, calculating eyes, not measuring whether I was good enough. I don't think it was that. More like she was checking whether what she felt was real, the way you test ice before you trust your weight to it. "I'll stay," she said. Not "I will." Not "yes." Not a declaration. Just, "I'll stay." Quiet and certain and plain as everything else she said, and worth more to me for that reason than any ceremony could have made it. We were married in April by a circuit preacher named Dawes who smelled of his horse and spoke faster than a man ought to at a wedding. Nora wore her good dress, she'd made a new one, dark blue wool, fitted at the shoulders, and she held my hand through the whole of it with the same steadiness she brought to everything. Not romantic, not trembling, just her hand in mine, solid and warm, as sure as ground. Keller from the survey camp came, brought a wedding gift of 2 hams and a jar of his wife's preserves, and shook my hand like he was glad to have been there that day in October, and a little surprised at how it had turned out. 3 neighboring ranchers came, their wives, the postmaster from the settlement, 12 miles south. 15 people total in my yard on a cold April day, with the grass coming in and the mountains still white. After Dawes had gone, and the neighbors had gone, we stood together on the porch in the late afternoon light, that particular thin gold light of a Montana April evening, long shadows off the cottonwoods, the air still cold enough to see your breath. She was looking out at the bench. "It's good land," she said again, the same words as that first evening, her on the back of my horse, coming up over the rise. "It is," I said. She leaned her shoulder into mine. Not dramatic, not a scene, just her weight finding mine, the way things find their level. I felt the deed against my foot inside my boot. I'm telling you all this because there's a version of this story where a man my age looks back and says he regrets the years alone, or says he should have found her sooner, or says something soft and rounded about fate. I'm not built that way, and I don't think it's true. Those 11 years built me into the man she found. The work did, the land did, burying my father and keeping his ground, and holding off every man who tried to take it. All of that was the making of something, and what it made was a man who knew how to stand in his own yard and mean what he said and not be moved. She saw that. She needed that, maybe, in the way that a woman who's been through what she'd been through needs to know the ground won't move under her again. And I needed her. I'll say it plain. I needed someone to split the kindling wrong and correct my hay-laying and go to Miles City on her own account and sit across a lamp from me in February and let the quiet be what it was. I needed her specific kind of knowing, which was that a man who holds what matters is worth holding on to. The deed is still in my boot, old habit. But it doesn't feel the way it did, like it's the last proof of who I am. It feels more like a reminder of where I started. Everything that matters now is above the boot line. The bench, the creek, the barn with its new ridgepole. Her in the kitchen, the lamp on, the sound of her moving through a house that doesn't list anymore. That's the whole of it. End.